Hello! In this episode we're going to be turning this polystyrene head into a sculpture. Once we're finished it's going to look a bit like this. You missed it? Looks like that. Okay, let's get on with it. First things first, we're going to gouge out the back of the head so that we've got a bit of space to put our diorama in. So we're going to draw a shape and get our hot wire cutter to chop out the bits we don't want. And once we've got the rough cut done, a little bit of brute force. There we go. Get that bit out of the way. The foam cutter leaves a bit of a mess, so I cleaned it up with some pliers and some sandpaper. And then to make sure everything was smooth and to give a good foundation for my diorama, I chopped some cardboard, sort of thick cardboard, to make the floors and walls. I hot glued those in and then chopped off the excess material. Next I filled in the gaps just so that I've got a smooth base to work on later on. I'm going to be covering it all anyway, but I just wanted to smooth in these gaps so I didn't end up having to do it later. Once that had dried, I wanted to add some texture, so I grabbed a rock from outside and started to just pummel the outside of the head. I did this all over, but it's not an effect I ended up going with. Instead, I went with a plaster mix, kind of like papier-mâché and plaster combined. So we mixed our plaster with some water and some PVA glue. And using sheets of toilet paper, I applied a thick coat of plaster papier-mâché kind of mix, I don't know what to call this, all over. And it kind of left this rocky exterior, which is what I wanted. Once I'd finished that and let that dry, it was time to paint. Now I've seen this been done a few times and I want to see if it works for everyone, so I just want to give it a black base coat, so let's see if the YouTube magic works. Oh great, it does. Who knew? I had no idea that would work, but there we go. I use these Wilko's tester pots for pretty much all of my paints, and all I'm going to do here is apply lighter and lighter coats, just dry brushed over the last one, to sort of add depth. Here I'm adding a bit of brown acrylic paint as weathering, just watering it down and dabbing it around, just to change it up and add a bit of texture to the whole thing. Next up we're going to add our greenery, so I've got some lichen moss, different mosses, some flock, and some clump foliage, which we're going to add all over it in as natural a pattern as we can, sort of give a foresty effect. This is probably my favourite part of the build. Adding the greenery makes everything come together and makes it look alive. along along with the greenery, I add some roots on all the overhangs. These look great because they just add a bit of realism to it, and they look a bit like little wispy eyebrows, which is nice. I added a few more bushes and that was the main foliage done. I wanted to add a tree here, and I wanted to test out a technique I've not used before, so I'm making a tree from scratch using a bit of dowel and some gardening wire. I cut my dowel to size and I sharpened up the top to give it the shape that I was looking for. I also added some score marks into it to give the impression of bark as well. Next I drilled some holes for my branches in the main trunk. I'm going to make the branches out of the gardening wire, and I just super glued these in. Next up, I painted the tree brown and bent the branches down so I got the shape of the tree that I wanted. So next, to add the pine needles or leaves or whatever you call them, I use this Moss Look hanging basket liner. Never used this before, I've had it for years, and I always had it in mind to do this kind of thing with it. It kind of worked. I mean, see for yourself. All I did was cut sections out and apply it to the branches with a bit of glue. Just wiggled it on. And then once I got it all on, I sort of trimmed it back to the tree shape. I think it looks okay. Whilst we're installing the tree, I want to give you the first opportunity to like, comment and subscribe on a video. How fun's that? Go on, give it a go. You know you want to. Alright, now that we've got the main foliage done, we're going to move on to the interior. The interior was looking a bit bland, so I wanted to add some architectural elements to it. So I added some pillars in the corner and some, what do you call them? Like the bits that go across the top of your roof, like picture hanging rails maybe, that sort of thing. I also did a door and a door frame at the back, and I left the door slightly open to put a bit of added mystery and intrigue. Why not? There we are. Once I'd done that, it was time to move on to our bookcases. Now, I wanted a few of these, so I wanted to make them all kind of uniform, so I cut a bunch of tall uprights in the same thickness of balsa wood. And I did the same with shelves. Then I cut them all to the same height using this little jig, and then measured out the size I wanted each to be, and then cut my shelves to the length that I want them. glued my bookshelf in and I added a couple more. It was then time to add my books to my bookshelves, so I made these out of some balsa and some cocktail skewers, and I scored lines into them to add definition to individual books. Made a bunch of these. I also had a few 3D printed books that I happened to have lying around. So I added these painstakingly into my bookshelves. With the library fully stocked, it was time to add some paint. I added some base coats up to the top to just black out the areas that I wanted to, and I also painted behind the door so that we don't see what's back there anymore. I added a base coat of brown to the bookshelves and a base coat of red to the walls, and then once I'd done that, gave everything a little bit of a dry brush and then started to paint the books. Painting the books took a little longer than I anticipated, and it was a lot fiddlier. I probably should have painted them before putting them in the bookshelf, but you know, you live and you learn. I've printed out some wallpaper to go at the top, so I cut this into little strips to simulate the sort of size of wallpaper you might find, and then pasted these in. I also roughed them up a bit and made them look a bit more rugged. I didn't want the room to look too clean and neat. I wanted it to look like it's been lived in and neglected and left. So I added sort of score marks into the paper and bent them over and chopped them up a bit to have a bit of weathering. Next I added some rugs, similar sort of thing, printed them, pasted them into the room where I wanted them, and again weathered them up a little bit with some inks and watered down paint. As some finishing touches, I added some discarded manuscripts and the 3D printed books that I painted up, and there it was, done. All that's left for me to say is thank you very much for watching. Do consider subscribing. I am going to try and do more of these. If you do want to write a comment, do that. And the like button is the little thumbs up, so press that one, will you? Nice one. Bye.